how do you feel with this furore over the past week when you have a high-profile BBC presenter and Gary Lineker actually comparing the policy to 1930s Germany, which, by the way, I believe he has a right to say it,
Sure.
not as a presenter with the BBC. He has a right to say it as a citizen, but I think we have a right to say that he's been incredibly intellectually dishonest.
Well, you know, I've experienced such comments from him as well when I was Home Secretary. I fundamentally disagree with that, and I disagree with his comments for the obvious reasons. You know, we can't sit back and do nothing. And the new plan for immigration, when I was Home Secretary, end-to-end reform of the asylum and illegal migration system. Our asylum system is overwhelmed. That's just a fact. You know, we have to change the way cases are being processed. That is a fact. That work is taking place. We recruited something like 1,000 case officers to process cases and all sorts of things. Reform of the immigration courts and tribunals, a one-stop shop so that people can't keep on going back at the expense of your viewers, the taxpayers, to go back and appeal and appeal and appeal. Remember those famous deportation flights that were blocked by the courts? We wanted to bring an end to that. Age assessments, 40-year-old men masquerading as teenagers. I mean, that's absolutely immoral, creating all sorts of safeguarding risks. That's why we had the National Anti-Borders Act, which still needs to be implemented fully. So look, the government rightly is saying, stop the boats. I endorse that completely. It's right that we do everything to do this. But remember one thing as well. If this was easy, it would have been done by now. There's no one single solution to this. It's deeply complex. It's criminal gangs upstream out of our country. We have a lot of work, brilliant work, by the way, undertaken by the National Crime Agency. We have brilliant people in law enforcement prosecuting people smugglers. The number of arrests of people smugglers went up last year and will continue to go up because we have the powers to do that through the National Anti-Borders Act.
Very quickly on security issue, you will have seen this BBC campaign to try and rehabilitate the image of Shamima Begum, the despicable ISIS terrorist. Now, when you were Home Secretary, you were absolutely clear that this woman must not re-enter the UK. Do you stand by those
Absolutely
comments?
right, absolutely right. And I maintain that. I will always maintain that position, on the basis that I have seen the security and intelligence information. And quite frankly, it is the job of the Home Secretary of the day to protect our citizens, protect our countries from individuals who are a threat. And I would absolutely re-endorse that position all over again.
We need to talk about the Conservative Democratic Organisation. You're a patron. This is a body that I fully support, because what we have seen happen in the Conservative Party over the past year is the opposite of democracy.
That's right.
I have described what's taken place as an anti-democratic coup. Now, none of this is actually about necessarily criticising the Prime Minister of the day, but members are unhappy, aren't they?
So they
and
are.
they need to get their democracy back. So tell me about what you're doing to make that happen.
I've been a long-standing proponent. I've spoken now probably for about 10 years about more democracy in the Conservative Party. I believe, you know, I'm a grassroots Conservative first and foremost, and then I'm an MP.
They didn't get to vote on the Prime Minister,
and that's
Priti.
the point.
They had no
And that's the point,
vote.
Dan. I'm aware of that, and I'm very vocal about all of that. But, you know, this does go back. It hasn't happened overnight. This has been a concerted issue for like probably 12 years since, you know, I was on the board of the party 12 years ago. I was elected to the board because I care about my party. I care about the governance of our party. I care about our members. I joined at the grassroots. I've always been a grassroots Conservative for that reason. The voice of the members, who, by the way, they're the ones where we must be about, I don't know, 45 days away from polling day with local elections coming up. They're the ones, day in, day out, while the members of Parliament are here in Westminster, putting the leaflets through the door, knocking on doors, engaging constituents.
Okay, but let me put this to you. They would have voted for Boris Johnson. So the party hierarchy stopped a vote from taking place.
Well, I was there at the
shocking.
time, Dan. You know, everyone knows this. I was there at the time. People know where my support and loyalties lie there. But at the same time, that is exactly the point, right? We have to make sure that the voices of our members are hard-working grassroots activists. It's never ignored again. And so
But if the members had been listened to, Boris Johnson would be Prime Minister today.
We may
he?
have a different outcome. We may have had a different outcome. You know, we can't roll back time and do crystal ball and all that kind of stuff.
But this is why it's such an important movement.
Fundamentally, it is important, and it's important for some other reasons as well. I mean, as I've said, you know, the party members should absolutely have a vote. Not everybody agrees with that in the party. Not all my colleagues will agree with that. But I also think even things like party conferences, you know, I'm ancient enough to remember the days when our members would come and have their voices heard at party conference. Now, I think that's important. I'm ancient enough to remember, you know, when they would be thanked personally by the leader of the party at party conference. It was Margaret Thatcher back then. But all these things really matter. And I think it's vital, in terms of healthy debate, but actually the democratic features that any political organisation must have. That's why I'm involved with the Conservative Democratic
And it's so important, and I think this is a movement that is going to build. Finally, something really shocking is taking place here at Westminster next week. I have said on the record on my show, Amanda Patel said on our Superstar panel this week, that it is a witch hunt. It is a witch hunt against the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson by the Privileges Committee led by Harriet Harman to try and finish his political career. What do you make of it, and how has it been allowed to happen?
So I think there has to be some serious questions asked about all of this. And Dan, you also followed in recent weeks, you know, the issues around Keir Starmer, Sue Gray, all these types of things. They're not happening in isolation. My views around what has happened, you know, are pretty well documented now as well. I think actually it's going to put our democracy in a very, very bad light. Where is democracy, quite frankly, right now? How can a handful of members of parliament and a committee, you know, really be that objective in light of some of the individual comments that have been made? I don't want to name people, but, you know, it is a fact. The lack of transparency, the lack of accountability. I think there is a culture of collusion, quite frankly, involved here that I really hope your viewers, you know, should they watch, and they are obviously following everything that's happened, they will start pressing and asking some serious questions, because we'll be doing the same here.
Do you think Boris Johnson's political career is over, or are they so scared of him because he is arguably the only Conservative who could beat Keir Starmer at the next election?
Well, I think, obviously, and I will say this with a degree of, you know, great conviction and support for Boris. I worked on both of his mayoral campaigns. I had the greatest privilege to be part of his general election campaign in 2019. Of course, he reaches parts of the public, the country, that others find quite difficult. And I say that collectively. It's quite hard when you're a member of parliament to, you know, appeal sometimes outside of the box or outside of the M25 if you're a Conservative sometimes as well. He has that, and he has great skill, and I have a lot of respect for him as well. He's the man that got us an 80-seat majority. Can't take that away from him, and you can't forget that as well. That speaks to his broad appeal. And also, I think the fact that he is a force of nature as well, his personality, the way he engages with people, and I think his own personal experiences, that he was a Prime Minister that took us through the pandemic. Whatever one thinks about the government's response to the pandemic, he was very sick during that time, carried on governing, made some tough decisions, got us the vaccine, you know, really turned things around for us. And I think people should just really remember, you know, that's what strong leadership is about, and good leadership too. And, you know, you can't just start airbrushing all of that and trying to diminish someone's reputation through a small committee, you know, with individuals obviously that may, you know, have a particular point of view or an agenda to push forward.
Yeah, and Sue Gray, who published that report, Keir Starmer has not even been prepared to reveal when he started talking to her about hiring her in a political role. I mean, that feels corrupt to me.
So I use the word collusion. You've just used the other word as well, and corruption. I think the public would expect better, quite frankly, in terms of transparency and accountability. Politics isn't a game. No. This is about public service and how we serve our country and the British people. And with that, you know, I think there are some serious questions that obviously Keir Starmer and the Labour Party should really be held to account over. along with others. You know, this didn't magic itself up overnight. There's clearly a lot of history that's gone on, and I think actually greater scrutiny needs to be given to that.
Including some in your party. But look, we will see what happens on Wednesday. Let's hope there is a fair outcome.
Exactly.
Former Home Secretary Priti Patel, such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you.